All right, what's up, everybody? It's Brian, the Gamer Guy, and we are here for my review of Octopath Traveler Zero. Now, um, I will be fair and honest. This game has been out now for over 4 months. It took me that long to really beat it, get to the end of it. So mine will probably have some spoilers. So if you are one of those who don't want the spoilers free, there are plenty of other awesome ones that have already been out long ago, that have already done the task that I'm setting out to do. And feel free to check any of them out. But with this one, I'm just going to say it, what I want to say about it and talk about it, story, graphics, gameplay, and we're going to go for that. Let's get right into it. Um, First of all, starting off talking about games and whatnot, let's just talk about graphics. Octopath Traveler Zero, really and truly, graphics are, they're beautiful. They're meant to capture this old pixelated style of 2D, yet there's an HD with it. So it's 2D, yet it's modern. I mean, and a lot of you who play these kind of games know this. You've seen it in so many games now, that retro look, and yet it's all modern and more crisp. It's really neat. It's neat how it looks so pixelated and yet so crisp at the same time. Like, we love HD 2D style games. Let's be honest. Any of us that grew up in that era, we love it. And the graphics here are not going to disappoint in that area. Now, graphically too, if you were one of those that like a crazy high fantasy, very beautiful kind of almost otherworldly alien kind of thing, you don't get that for most of the game. In all reality, Octopath Traveler started out in a lot of ways wanting to be a game that was fantasy, but it wanted to be kind of grounded a little bit more, and a lot less so. So a lot of times you don't get the real cool high fantasy looking things until you do like that post game stuff. The normal part of the games were, cities and plains and castles and mountain passes and deserts and ice places, and they were all very samey, very simple architecture and design, very similar, and nothing was there meant to pop or be extravagant or crazy. And Octopath Traveler Zero goes in that style too for most of the game. Very samey. Like, you hit this city and it's got a little bit of an aesthetic, like a desert nomadic Egyptian kind of aesthetic or Byzantinian kind of thing there. And then you got one that looks more like a woodland village with cabins and stuff, and one that might be have houses out of stone. But it's just done in a color palette with earthly colors and things that it's normal. You know what I'm saying? It just feels very normal, like you're in this normal medieval world, sort of. Castles are castles. You don't have these insane architectural designs and stuff. They all have similar thing. Mansions or mansions. So there is that kind of thing with the artistic design. And a lot of the earlier bosses and monsters, they're squirrels, they're rabbits, there's some lizards. I mean, you have a lot of humans, like, your average thugs and your average knights and all that, and everything's kind of meant to look down to earth for a lot of it. And again, the color palette has a earthier tone to it, not high, bright, colorful or anything, but the graphics are still amazing and well done. Now, once you get kind of towards the end of the game, that does start to change. You do start to see some more outlandish designs. I mean, the first one I noticed is at the end of Bestower of Wealth. I mean, the pyramid dungeon, that final dungeon there, that final gold dungeon. I mean, it's crazy. It's all gold coins everywhere and extravagant amounts and stuff, and it's a very long dungeon, and it does start to have a much more otherworldly kind of design, and that more high fantasy crazy kind of design you might be used to from playing a lot of RPGs. And then it's also expressed in the final dungeon of the Bestower of Fame. When you go after Seraphina, that's this big crazy volcanic dungeon, and you're trying to find this place, and it looks like you're kind of venturing closer and closer to the depths of hell. Absolutely, and it's got that aesthetic and stuff because it deals more with the gate of Finis and all that stuff, and it starts to look really crazy and stuff. And her boss fight's amazing and crazy because she turns into this big seraphic monster with wings and stuff. And then you fight Lie Black, and it's this big crazy demon monster and stuff, and so that starts to look really high fantasy and otherworldly. And then when you go into the underworld, same thing. You got all these, that does start to look more alien. You got all these crystallized plants and purpley rocks and purple sky and stuff. And then when you get there, that is very otherworldly when you start to explore the underworld. So as the game progresses closer to the end game, yes, it becomes otherworldly. Go to the gates of Ursa, heavenly. You're going into the clouds, the skies, and all that stuff, and it has that appeal to it as well. Otherworldly. So it goes from a normal thing to, as the story progresses and the stakes progresses, the art style and things does become overworldly. Um, Talking music too. Let's go through the music. Again, keeping with that chill and normal sense, a lot of the music, and I'll try to throw some examples up here as I'm talking, is very just, it's ambience, it's in the background, it's there, it's good, it's well done, but it definitely doesn't have this crazy over the top vibe for the most part of it. The town musics are just very calm, chill, almost a jazz like feel in some of them, or a cozy woodland feel in another of them. And then the plains, same thing. You get this cozy plains feel, or you get this frozen Iceland feel, but it does try to keep the music grounded. But then you get, again towards the end of the game, the underworld and stuff like that, and then you get some really much more what I would expect from playing a JRPG, like your Final Fantasies and your Tales games and stuff. You get some more, and I'm not a music major and stuff. I don't know how to explain some of this stuff, but the tones of the music, the style of the music, it's much more out there. It's much more aggressive and catches your attention more. Just um, it just starts to kick and hit a lot more for me personally. And the other music, it wasn't meant to catch your attention, I thought, as much as to be there to provide ambience to the story. And then it seems like that other music is really meant to get you in. Like that's like the stuff you're rocking to, like playing those Nihon Falcon games and stuff, that kind of stuff. Or a lot of the underworld music. If anybody's ever played Paladin's Quest or Linus 2 on the Super Nintendo, it reminds me of some of those tracks in some ways. I mean, they had some really good tracks and some really just things that caught my eye and attention, my ear, I mean, not my eye. So the music does change as well once you get further. It's like it gets more intense and stuff as the stakes increase. I think it was all well planned, and it went up and just continued to increase in intensity as the game and the story increased. I loved it. I mean, all of it was really cool. All right, now let's kind of go on to story beats. Now, for story beats, again, this will be spoiler heavy in some ways. I mean, I'm not going to reveal everything, but it's spoiler heavy. So if you need to skip this section and go on. So story, like first of all, if you remember the first Octopath Travelers, Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, I really think they weren't going for that whole save the world vibe. They were going for 8 character separate journeys, and the journeys were things like Primrose wanting revenge for her father, or Albrecht wanting revenge for his kingdom, catching a friend that betrayed you. All these things were meant to be the stories in the beginning, and they weren't meant to be save the world, fight gods, and things like that. And Octopath Traveler 1 especially, that's how it goes. And there's a post game kind of thing and stuff that does kind of go into that, but that's kind of there. You don't have to do it. You can just play the game like that, and you got 8 different stories, and you're going on these stories and stuff, and it's very human, very down to earth. Um, when Octopath Traveler Zero starts, it starts kind of like that. Your town is invaded by 3 very greedy people with rings, and they're looking for the Flamebringer's ring, Alfric's ring. And so in the process, they discover it's at your town of Wishvale, and they destroy Wishvale, and they kill some of the residents, and everybody else flees. You are then your main character, and you have a protagonist. You don't have 8 separate protagonists. You have a protagonist. You are tasked with rebuilding. And so the story progress and revenge. You're doing 3 things: rebuilding and going out and getting the ring to people that did this to you. And so the story at first goes in 2 different parts. It's rebuild Wishvale and go through all 3 of these villains, and each of these villains has 3 chapters. Fame, wealth, and power. And you go through these 3 chapters, and you eventually beat these people, and at the same time you're recovering Wishvale. So Wishvale is a story of growth and recovery and dealing with your loss, but also having hope. And these stories are stories of, let's deal with the problem, let's deal with the bad guys. They're kind of revenge tales, but they're also kind of like, you can't have evil roaming unchecked like that. So they're also about that. And so then when you beat these people, you're like, okay, I'm not very far in the game. I mean, I've only spent 20 hours. They said it's a long game. Well, then all of a sudden it goes into the Master of All instead of Master of Wealth, Fame, Power, Master of All. And then you got like 8 chapters, and you're dealing with a corrupt king. Um, and that the intensity scales. Now it's not just dealing with these individual despots, but now a despot on a larger scale, like on a continental scale. And so you're like, wow, and it just intensifies and intensifies, and that's different because, again, like in Octopath 1 and 2, there are some very human aspects. These characters are dealing with their own agendas and stuff. And this is a very obviously evil agenda. Like, this guy is just a tyrannical king. He's starving people. He's going after taking over nations, and he's not making those nations' lives any better. He's just a tyrant. It's a very black and white thing. It's very easy to understand. So that's how it's different in Octopath Traveler. And then at the same time, Wishvale is continuing. You're continuing that story of hope and growth, and still each of the town members' losses and things. And then you still kind of keep going with that story. Now, spoiler alert, after you finish the power arc, or bestower or master of all arc, you go back, it does this, and then you get 3 more villains and 3 more rings. And instead of master, it's bestower of power, bestower of fame, and bestower of wealth. And you got worst villains, and then you go through those 3 stories and you fight the worst villains. But as you do that, it's kind of hinting at some other darker things. And it does a good job of tying it in, because you'll learn about the Gates of Finis, and you will learn about hints at, Orsa and Goldera and stuff. And it just reveals these things to you slowly as you're dealing with these other villains. Now, at this point, depending on how you do things, Wishvale should be coming to an end. You should have Wishvale restored, but not even just restored, but even better than ever. And it's like, we've grown this wonderful place and stuff like that. And this should be coming to an end by then. And then you go back and you finish those last 3 arcs, and the stakes are higher this time. They're even higher. These people seem to be worse. And then it converges again, and then you don't have the master of all, you have the bestower of all. And this is where the story goes crazy. This is where it's definitely not Octopath Traveler, because then it becomes a save the world, fight gods, learn about creation, stop evil said people from conquering said world and recreating the world in their image. And you have that kind of story arc then. And so then it becomes much more what a lot of JRPG players kind of expect and like, especially if you played them in the 90s and the PlayStation era, the Super Nintendo era, the or PlayStation 2 era. You got your games that are just world spanning epics, and it's kind of like that. You are now fighting gods and demons and going into the underworld and going into the very heavens themselves. Going into alternate reality and seeing how life might be if you weren't there, or if this didn't happen. It definitely takes a departure from the normal Octopath Traveler cycle in that regards. It is definitely very different. Um, and so, if you were a fan of the other more down to earth stories, you may be a little put off by this, because it definitely takes a different toll. I liked it better. I was with it. I was there for that better than I was the other way. That's just me. In the other Octopath Travelers, I found it very redundant to go do this person's first chapter, then this person's first chapter, then this person's, and do that 8 times, and then go back and do everybody's second chapter. It made the stories feel very fragmented. I just didn't like how that worked personally. I I would have rather it done a playthrough kind of thing, where maybe pick one person at a time and you have to go through all their chapters, and you can just recruit people at random. And then if you wanted to do a second playthrough, like Saga Frontier style, I don't know. I didn't dig that. I loved how Octopath Traveler built to a bigger conflict, and built to a more epic conflict, and continued. Some people may not like that. I get it. It's redundant. You're climbing the ladder, whatever. I get it. Okay, now talking gameplay and things like that. Now, Octopath Traveler Zero has quality of life improvements in the areas of exploration. I mean, if in your opinion, like, used to, you would go on the fields and you wouldn't have a map. You'd have a radar kind of thing, and then you could see the green spot where you could kind of go, but there was no map. You kind of had to learn those areas and kind of get to the radar so you could get fast travel unlocked to that town or whatever. In Octopath Traveler Zero, there is a very clear dungeon map with you very clearly on that map and where you're at, and it very clearly marks the bosses, the treasure. When you find, it just marks everything very clearly. The quest marker, yes, and same thing. In the towns, there's quest markers. You can see recruiting the characters in orange, and the next story quest is in green, and side quests are in orange, like recruiting characters, and you can see where everything is. So there's not the same kind of detective and guesswork like there was. So what I'll tell you is, if you like more modern RPGs and even Western RPGs where they clearly mark what you need to do, clearly list your objectives, clearly show you these are side objectives you could do, and then clearly show you where you can go on the map, Octopath Traveler Zero is better for you in that respect because it does that. And not only that, but on the world map, first it starts where you can transport towards just towns, but eventually you can unlock your blue flame, and then you can unlock dungeon transport. So you can just transport to any town, any dungeon, anything on the world. So it's not just you have to transport to a town and then walk to the dungeon. No, you if you unlock that, you can go to the dungeons too. And so exploration is easier than it's ever been in this one, and it's more accessible and stuff than it's ever been, and it respects your time in a lot better ways because of that. So it is definitely a change, and if you like that, it is great. I like it the more modern I become because I teach full time. I've got a kid. Sometimes it's better, it just saves me time to get to enjoy the game versus having to do all the detective work. Now, if you do like the detective work and stuff, you need to play Octopath 1 and 2. They're better for you in that way because they don't just clearly mark everything, and they don't just have a map everywhere, and you can't teleport to everything. You have to walk to some of the dungeons. The dungeons don't clearly show you where all the monsters are. So to find a side quest, you actually have to start talking to villagers and stuff to find side quests and stuff. And then it doesn't tell you everything you need. You have to go figure it out. You have to remember what was in this town or remember what was in that town. So it is, if you like that piece it together detective thing, then the first two are better for you in that one. And Octopath Traveler Zero kind of falls short for that, for sure. Octopath Traveler Zero takes a more modern approach of conveniences. I liked it. Now, combat, combat is similar to the other games. You have the breaks, you have the pushing system where you build up BP and then you can spend all your attacks in one. You have to break their defenses to get your best attacks. You have, different weapons that break different things, different elementals that break different things. Now, the big difference is, and this changes the pacing a lot, you have 8 characters. And this really makes a difference in normal combat because whereas other Octopath Traveler games it was could be very slow in normal combat because you only had 4 people, and then that was only so many ways you had to break monsters and stuff, and so many damage dealers and stuff. So normal combat could drag. In this one, it goes a lot faster because there's 8 characters. You have that many more weapons and spells on hand right away without having to go change every time you go to a new field, like change classes or stuff before you go to a new field or change characters or whatever. You don't have to do that as often. And then with that many more options, you break them faster, you're dealing damage faster, other people are recharging BP faster in the back row. It makes the normal battles flow faster, and then that helps the pacing go. Also, it just adds a different kind of flow because, like I said, you might be using your front row at the same time, but at the same time you're charging your back row and they're ready to swap in. And then you can have a front row of breakers and attackers or whatever, and a back row of healers with elementalists, or back row of disablers and elementalists, and you have just a wider array of options. Now, to counter that, they do make the bosses have more hit points and things, I feel, and they can be long-winded bosses. I mean, you can be fighting 30 to 40 minutes on a boss fight very easily. And if you lose, you're starting it over, and some of the bosses can be more difficult. So the combat is in this respect, but they also have a leveling system. You don't change jobs anymore. The main character can change jobs, but you don't go find all these special jobs. It's about recruiting characters because it was based off the mobile game. And so you have like 33 characters you can recruit, and each one has special things they can do. And so it's about swapping in those characters. But then eventually you hit a point, and I didn't realize this till like way too late in the game. You can master certain skills from each character and then go equip those skills onto your party. So you don't have to swap everybody and stuff. You can take some of the skills that you like and form your own party. And you can do that, and you can say, like, okay, I'll take these out, these defense lowering skills from this character and put them on these three, and these defense lowering characters from these skills from these characters and put them on these three, and then these ones need these combat skills, and these ones need these elemental skills, and you can custom your own party by leveling up other character skills to a mastery level, and then making a copy of those skills. It can be a grind because it costs JP to do that, but you can essentially shape your own party with the characters that you like because of this system without having to be like, well, I'm going to need so and so for this, or I'm going to need so and so for this. You can actually do it that way. It takes a little bit longer until you get to end game if you do it that way, but you can. Otherwise, you can through the main game. I found that I could do most of what I needed to do with the party I chose, with occasional character swapping. And that brings me to the next point: the grind. It's not as intense here. Like they structure it better. They structure it differently, so that you are kind of spiraling out from the original area of Wishvale and the three towns of Valor and Emberglow and Theotropolis. You eventually spiral out through the world, and there's not as many like polarizing place hit stops where you're like, oh, I'm not even going to be able to get to this area because I have to go to these level 24 areas and I'm level 13 and it's too hard. I've got to grind for a little bit. You don't have that through this area. You can actually get through this game without grinding. And if you do grind, it's probably minimal. It's usually you're grinding for some materials or wish veil or whatever, but you can get through this game without grinding. Um, it's more about tactic and stuff. And even when you level up, the level up is marginal and it increases you slowly. It doesn't, and gaining 10 levels isn't as much of a power play as you might think. It scales slowly. The only thing I would say that you have to grind for is if you want to do the end game, if you want to fight Goldera, you're going to have to grind seeds or nuts. You just are, like, because that's how you get your stats up high enough to be able to fight him, because you can't do it through leveling. You could get to level 99 and your stats would still be low because the way it scales is slower. And so level 99 is not too much more powerful than level 70. It's not that much more powerful. It is, but not much. So you spend a lot of your times grinding seeds and grinding nuts so you can increase your character's base stats. And that is the only part where I experienced a grind. And it took me a bit, but I mean, I was probably too powerful because I mean, like my 8 people, like pretty much were able to kill Goldera without even being hardly damaged by him. Like the damage he did was minimal to my main party. He killed a lot of the other characters because they weren't. I didn't grind all 33 characters' stats like that, but that was the only time I had to grind. And even then, I did too much, so I could have scaled back and still beat him, and it would have been harder, but I would have beat him. So grinding is different too. Again, it's part of that more accessible thing. All right, and that's mostly what I'd have to tell you about the game. That really covers what you're going to get. It's a very long story. It'll take you 100 hours to get through the game. 1 second, sorry. Um, and that's what the game most entails. The last thing I would talk about is the building of Wishvale. And if a lot of you are like, but I don't want to build a town, I don't want to do this. You don't technically have to, but there's some power ups you'll kind of need if you want to do the post game that you're going to need. You know what I'm saying? You will need it, but you can probably get by without really putting all the effort into that town. You'll just take away some conveniences. You won't be able to customize your party the same way. You'll have to swap out characters and stuff, so you will hinder yourself some. But what I'm going to say about Wishvale building, it's not like an intensive building kind of thing. It's not like playing like Ruin Factory or these slow life kinds of games and stuff. The building is there, but it is much less invasive than what you might think. And putting characters in a house, it's there, but it's. I've played games that have a lot more intensive of a building thing. It's there to be dealt with. I found it to be fun and not too pressing. I could do it, but not have to be stuck with it for too long at a time. And I felt it was a nice diversion. Everybody may feel different on that, so it's whatever you feel. But anyways, if you are a fan of JRPGs and stuff, if you did not like the first two Octopath Travelers, you might like this one. It's different. If you like the first two, you may not like this one because it is so different. That's just everybody's opinion. But what I would say is I loved it. It kept me entertained for like 4 months almost, and I feel that it was really well worth it. So, anyways, that has been my review of Octopath Traveler Zero. I will continue to play video games. I hope more people watch these reviews. I hope these reviews inspire you to try a game or to help you be informed as of not to try a game, whatever the case. That we're here to continue that hobby, to grow that hobby, and to put information out there for all of you hobbyists and gamers. All right. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.